fakes the one-timer. Now a shot, score, up goal, and Massachusetts takes the lead.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the NewMass Minute Talking Puck in Amherst. My name's Jay Burnham, voice of the Minutemen, alongside my broadcast partner, Nathan Strauss. And Nathan, good to see you, buddy. We'll talk about this past weekend and this upcoming weekend. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. Apologies for the leaf blowing that's taking place outside my window. I've got no heat, I've got no hot water, but I do have very attentive landlords when it comes to the lawn. So all is well. But all is well.
So last week I was in the penalty box and we had all the lights flashing and whatnot as we were recording. And now you've got the leaf situation, which just let them be, man. I'm a guy that just the leaves fall from the trees like God intended. You let them go back into the earth.
It's supposed to be good for your lawn, right?
I know. Yeah.
You need to ask Tyler Murray this question because he's the one who knows all about lawn care.
Mr.
But
Homeowner
I
himself.
digress.
Yeah. Well, I apologize if you need to file a grievance on behalf of you and I to your landlord. We will do that afterwards. We had a little bit of a grievance this past weekend. Unfortunately for Massachusetts, did not win fully outright either game against UConn, which I think is a much improved UConn team from a year ago. Let's start on Friday night. A shootout win for the Minutemen. What an atmosphere. And Idar Suniev gets it done again with the clock expiring to send us into OT. What were your thoughts on that one?
I mean, first of all, I think that was the best student atmosphere and the best Mullen Center atmosphere I've seen in the last couple of years. Really just so encouraging. And it was obviously, family weekend, parents weekend. And, they opened the doors a little bit early. The students were there at 5:30 already lining up. And that's how it used to be. I had the experience of being a student at UMass pre-COVID, and you would have people start lining up at 4 p.m. And I was checking out there at 4:30, and you already had 100 people, 100 plus people in line. So that was really encouraging. I thought the atmosphere was tremendous. And then I think everyone who was there was rewarded with a really entertaining game. UMass defensively maybe didn't have the best first two periods. But again, I think this was a game that UMass deserved to get, if not all 3 points, certainly the 2 points they did get. And I mean, even the shootout alone was just so entertaining.
Yeah.
7 straight saves, and then Lucas Mercury coming through. So that was quite the atmosphere, quite the game.
It was amazing. Credit to everybody involved at UMass for creating that environment and the sold out crowd. And then, yeah, you get the payoff at the end for the Minutemen. You fall behind, you get a chance to tie it up. And then UConn, I think, took advantage of some turnovers this weekend for UMass, which created some breakaway opportunities. But 8 rounds in the shootout. Now, I think I had mentioned this on air. I went back and looked last year. UMass did not have much success in these shootout situations. And so to see them to get one this year, they didn't get one last year, 0 for 3, had to at least buoy their spirits a bit.
Yeah, and I will say, I think, UMass had the benefit this year of having Michael Grabel in net. Last year, it was not Michael Grabel who was in net for 2 of those 3 shootouts. It was during the sort of World Juniors and immediately post-World Juniors period. And I thought he was really, really good in the shootout in particular. He kept UMass in it. But you could feel the tension growing with each round. And the goal that Don Zlishmila scored to start it off, too, the Kucherov, where he just lets the puck go and fakes the shot. That was incredible. I asked Carter about it on.
Did you ask him, did he do that on purpose? Because there were people that thought maybe he didn't do it intentionally.
So I asked Carter, did you think that was what he was going to do? Did you think it was on purpose? And he said, Nathan, why do you think he's shooting first? He actually, I think his total quote was, I coach the guy every week in practice. There's a reason he goes first. I know a few things still, So he went first, and then obviously the next 6 all missed. But then Lucas Mercury finishes it off, and I think sends the fans home happy.
Had 1 goal taken off the board in that game as well due to goalie interference, a theme we saw last season. And I'm not sure if that really kind of took the wind out of their sails a little bit. But I think overall, you like the way that UMass has been able to battle back. They did so on Saturday. They fell behind 3-0, end up making it a 3-2 game and buzzing towards the end to try and tie things up down at UConn. Your impressions of the second game, and I'll get to Carv's comments on that in a second.
Yeah, I personally thought it was the worst 60-minute performance of the season for UMass. And that's the kind of thing that will happen over the course of a year. It's the second night of a back-to-back. You get a big emotional swell after coming back in the late stages of Friday. And they were just a little disjointed on Saturday, I think. They weren't playing super connected. There were some individual mistakes, I think, and they had to rejig the lines. Daniel Yenchko got hurt on the first shift of the game. And so you ended up having James Dewar, who was making his debut, play, the full game on that fourth line. You didn't have the extra skater anymore. And, you give up a shorthanded goal early on. You can't get much offense going. It was just one of those days. And, after the game on Friday, Greg Carvel said through 6 games, he thinks that they were the better team, or they deserved to win in all 6 of them. They were 3-2-1 at that point. This one was the first one where UMass did not deserve to win, and they were outplayed by a UConn team that played well at home. And it was a good day for UConn. It was a poor day for UMass, and it's the kind of thing that, fortunately now you've got one game this week, and can rectify that before going back into Hockey East play.
Before we get to AIC, here's the Carve comments after the loss on Saturday night. He said, I really liked our start, how we came out. I thought we were doing a great job. We got a power play, and then they made that high-risk play, and it's in the back of our net. That was a shorthand goal that he's referring to. Then UConn took over for the next 20 minutes. Another bad turnover by the defense leads to another goal. But he said in the third period, we played some good road hockey and found a way to make the game close. But that's what you get. We got what we deserve tonight. And he's referencing kind of some of those sloppy plays and being outmaneuvered by UConn early on after he said they came out to a good start. So he doesn't mince words, never has, and that'll be a message for the team heading into not only AIC this Saturday, but then you're not back at home for a little bit because you go on the road the following weekend to take on Vermont.
Yeah, and again, I think when you look at how this UMass team has been playing, I think it is encouraging that 2 of the first 10 games this year will be at the Mullen Center. And we've already seen those 2 games so far. And by the time the Minutemen are back, it's going to be, 2 weeks from Thursday, 2 weeks from Thursday. So Thursday the 14th, before UMass plays their third home game. So whatever the record that UMass has at that point, they've got 3 games until then at AIC and then at UVM for 2. They have an incredibly home-loaded schedule coming up after that, including a stretch of 4 straight home games, a stretch of 6 home games and 7 coming up in January. And you're doing this with a young D-core that has garnered a lot of attention when it comes to the individual mistakes, but also some of the good plays that we've seen so far, like Gallanty at Sacred Heart. So there are learning moments that can only happen on the ice. And you think about the learning that happened when Ryan Ufko and Scott Morrow were here in their freshman year, 3 years ago. And it's the kind of thing that does happen. And you will have players who are able to generate a lot with their risk taking, but it's all about learning when to apply that. And I think we saw a little bit of the misapplication of that this past weekend. And it's the kind of thing that they will learn from. So fortunately, UMass has, a chance to get on home ice later on, and a good chance to sort of get back in the win column. Oh, it's harsh to call it a get right game, but this is a weaker AIC team that they've got coming up this weekend, and a chance to pick up a road win and get the heads right before UVM.
Okay, before we talk about AIC, I should mention Eric Gallanty will be joining us on the show. He is one of the voices of Hockey East. He co-hosts This Week in Hockey East, which airs on Friday leading up to the Hockey East game of the week. You'll see him on Nesson with Bridget Prue and some of the other broadcasting core that Hockey East has brought in, including our own Cooper Boardman and Kevin Gale. So excited to talk with Eric about Hockey East and where the league stands and some of the improvements that they've made this season. He's coming up in just a second, but I wanted to get your thoughts before AIC. Who was a winner of the weekend for you from the UMass perspective?
Ooh, from the UMass perspective, I would say the UMass student section is one winner.
Who on the ice as the winner or that impressed you this past weekend?
I thought Don Zlishmilis played pretty well across the 2 games. I thought Jack Musa had a good couple of games. The play that he made to jump up and glove that puck down in the Friday game was really good. Lyndon Alger getting that goal on Saturday, I thought was important. But really, I think this UMass team lives and dies as a team in particular. And, I think when you come off a weekend where you take only 2 of 6 points, I think everyone wants to get better and do more. And maybe the other player would be Lucas Mercury, who got to have a nice moment with that shootout winner the other day. So I think a lot of people who played well on Friday might have wanted to do a little bit more on Saturday, and vice versa. So it's hard to pick one standout performer. Did you have a guy?
I keep watching Lucas Olfstad, and he's now at a point where he's fired more pucks on net this year than he has his entire season a year ago at Denver. And I like watching him and Owen Murray when they're on the ice because they're kind of when each of them are on the ice, they're a little bit different, but obviously play the same position. So I think it's hard to pull away. Cole O'Hara would have been the guy had you allowed that next goal, the goal that was taken away, to stand. But yeah, I think it's kind of difficult when you are saying, hey, look, we had 2 points out of six, but there was some things to like, and I like watching Olverstad play.
And I do think that was the right call, by the way. It looked, I mean, to me, it
was
looked like pretty obvious goalie interference. So,
all right, you get AIC this weekend. You and I will be at Mississippi State, so we will be watching with one eye on the game at 1 o'clock, and then Mississippi State will kick off at 4:15 for UMass football. What's the prognosis here? And you said get right game, but that's not right. Obviously, in hockey, there's always a chance, and there's AIC can play it tough. Just because it's not Hockey East doesn't mean it's not going to be a tightly fought game, especially on the road.
yeah, and Eric Lang, the head coach of AIC, is one of the best coaches in college hockey and one of the best people in college hockey. And he and Greg Carville are really close, and this is a program that deserves a lot of respect. But this is also a program that right now is 1-4-1 through 6 games and lost a ton of talent, including, probably the best goalie in the Atlantic to Merrimack. They lost a lot of other guys, Lewis Lidner to UVM, who we'll see next week. And, they're coming in struggling. They've used 3 different goalies this year. They have a hard time establishing a number one. And unfortunately, what AIC did so well in the pre-transfer portal era is they identified basically this market inefficiency, under-recruited guys, a lot of whom are European, playing in tier 2 junior leagues, who end up making a huge impact when they get ice time at AIC. And it led them to a number of consecutive AHA championships. It led them to that famous 16-1 upset, probably the biggest upset in modern college hockey, a couple of years ago against St. Cloud. But it's been a slower start for them this year as they kind of iron out their issues in net. They iron out, who's going to be playing where. And so the transfer portal, I think, has hurt them a lot. It hurt the Atlantic as a whole, as you talked about, going into the Sacred Heart series. So this is a game that UMass really has to win. At the same time, AIC is always a tough customer. They always play UMass tight. A couple years ago, there was a shootout between these two teams. Last year, UMass, I think, picked up a 5-2 win at the Mullen Center. I think it was the season opener in early October. So this is a team that, this team lost to Air Force and then beat Air Force. And that's an Air Force team that UMass dispatched pretty handily earlier. So they do have the capabilities to surprise. They picked up they got a game to a shootout at Ohio State. So you can't take them lightly, but UMass will have a skill advantage in this one, and they need to make it count, I think, coming off of last weekend.
And they're going to come out hungry, you would certainly imagine, after this past weekend. Nathan, thanks so much. We'll see you this weekend. We'll check in with you next week.
Thank you. I'll see you.
All right, he's Nathan Strauss. Coming up on the NewMass Minute, we will dive into Hockey East with one of the voices and faces of Hockey East on NESN. Eric Gallanty joins us now.
With 25 seconds to go, Scott with a little check. Olverstad sends it on net. Loose puck out in front. Another shot. They score! Ties it with 17.6 to go. And it's a whole new game here at the Mullen Center.
And we continue on our NewMass Minute, talking Hockey East as we get into conference play with Eric Gallanty. He is one of the voices of Hockey East on NESN, also co-host of This Week in Hockey East with Bridget Prue on NESN as well. Eric, good to see you, buddy. How you doing?
I'm great. The only thing that could make this better is if we were on the 10th tee somewhere, but happy to talk hockey with you.
I've seen your game. I don't think we need to go there, but yeah, we got some puck, and I wanted to get into, I guess, like a wide swath of
Mhm.
Hockey East so far. You'll be covering a lot of this league throughout the course of the season. Looking at the league going into the year, what were your expectations, and what's been impressed or stood out for you so far?
Yeah, I think the depth, once again, just like last year, kind of stands out. I mean, I think you can kind of see BC and BU at the top and Maine up there as well. Then you have UMass and Providence, which look like tournament teams early in the season. But I mean, you guys just saw UConn last week. They're really improved from last year. Lowell's back in the top 20 for the first time in a little while. You even go down the card when you talk to coaches. I remember I was talking to, Steve Wheeler, the head coach of Vermont early in the season. And he says, I don't know if we're going to get there, but there's reasons to believe that we think we can be a tournament team. So you have 11 deep that think there's a possibility that get to the tournament. And that's a really exciting time because it makes, no game unmeaningful in the league. And it really shows the depth top to bottom, across Hockey East.
You got 6 teams in the top 20. You mentioned Vermont. UMass is on the road this weekend at AIC, and then they go up to Vermont for a couple of the games. Let's take a look at the Hockey East preseason poll. BCBU, as you mentioned at the top. Vermont voted down at the bottom. Obviously, things are always really tight in this conference, but what do you make of that, preseason poll, and how has it stood up so far?
Yeah, I think it's fair. I think, it's crazy to say because they were in the top four, but Maine might actually be undervalued the way they've played so far, right? They're unbeaten so far, and they have 2 games with Merrimack this week, and then they have a huge showdown with Boston College for 2 games coming up next week. So that should be fun. But yeah, I mean, I think, UMass fans know this. You gotta be, when you're picked, fifth, sixth, fourth, fifth, sixth, whatever it is, you're right around that bubble margin. So it makes it really interesting. I think everything was fair in the preseason. I think it's just the league's really deep, right? Like you watch that UConn team. I'm not sure they're an eighth place team in a league, but that's where they are because the league's so deep. And UMass deserves to be where they are. BCBU deserve to be where they are. So I don't think there's any games that are easy, especially going on the road in this league. And it makes those non-conference games really important because you feel like everybody's going to kind of beat up on everybody in the middle of the pack in the league.
Yeah, you've got BC St. Cloud this
Mhm.
weekend, which will be a big one for the conference. We had a game here on Friday. UMass UConn Minutemen win in a shootout, or rather tie, I guess, win the extra point. 8 rounds of depth in that shootout. What's the longest shootout you've seen as a broadcaster?
I haven't gotten to do that many shootouts, so I really have not had a long one so far. But I imagine now that we're doing automatic shootouts, even in the non-conference this year, I'm going to get one soon. But I don't have a good shootout story, unfortunately. I wish I did. I think I've maybe only done two, as crazy as that sounds.
When
But
it
yeah, I
goes
have not
that
done that
long,
many.
do you blame the goal? Do you blame the guys for not getting the puck in the back of the net, or do you credit the goalies for standing on their head?
Oh, I don't know. Do I have to give a political answer here? I think you blame the
Either
guys,
one.
right?
Yeah,
Goalies are
yeah.
tired too, right?
I know, right? Yeah.
Find a way.
When one of the great things, 2 things I want to cover just league wide. We'll notice this year. I think it didn't work at UMass last weekend. They're trying to figure out some kinks, but the referees have microphones, so hopefully, at least for the penalties, not sure about the reviews, but we'll try to get into referees really educating the fans on what's happening and what's being said. You know, to me, that's an indicator of how this league is trying to take things, to the next level.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things that you could talk about with rules is that everything's trying to get closer to the NHL game. And does ref mics impact that directly? No, but is every one little thing important in its own right? Maybe not. But when you add it all together, and you consider the number of, real NHL prospects, the draft prospects that have started coming into college hockey the last 5, 10 years compared to beforehand, like it all adds up. It all matters. It just feels professional. It feels like it's getting closer and closer to the NHL. It's helpful for broadcasters as
No
well to,
doubt.
know what the calls are and know what they're reviewing. But yeah, that's a big win. Shout out Hockey East office for that one.
New rules this year. I heard you
Yeah.
mention it on the Hockey East opener down at BU about the high sticking, right? And it's now from the shoulders and below before it was kind of an arbitrary 4 feet off the ice.
Hmm.
Early in the season, have you seen that come into play? And do you think that'll have any ramifications for a bigger team like Massachusetts?
Yeah, I think it definitely could. We saw it once in that BU game where Cole Iserman, whoops, sorry, Cole Iserman, who's a
Nice
first
hit.
round pick, nice save. He kind of knocked it out of the air, and it was probably slightly above the crossbar, but it was below his shoulder. So that's probably waved off last year, and it's a good play this year. And he ended up knocking it down and then scoring a power play goal. He's really good for BU. So yeah, I think that'll definitely have an impact. The one I'm kind of interested in is the face-off one because it goes back to the NHL rule, right? You get tossed instead of just the warning. And I think basically every coach agreed that the warning was allowing the really good face-off guys to cheat because they knew they had a second chance at it, and no one was really getting to the point where they would be called for a penalty. So now you go back to the NHL rule, but does that force coaches to change their lines maybe down the stretch? Do you need a second faceoff guy out there when maybe in last year's game you didn't have to because you need to win a big faceoff down the stretch? It's still early enough in the season. I don't think we've seen a ton of decision making just
Yeah.
based on that rule specifically, but I think that definitely could be a factor down the stretch and is different than years past.
Man, that is a incredibly insightful point where you're in the offensive zone. You know, UMass has had this a couple of times where they pulled the goalie. There's six attackers in
Mhm.
the last minute trying to. It's happened twice. They've been able to get a goal. Almost happened on Saturday down at UConn again. And yeah, you got to have more guys that can take a face off, especially
Yeah.
in those scenarios where you are trying to cheat to win it and gain the advantage. And then you go back to last year, you're saying, okay, look, if you're a guy that knows he's good, can push the envelope to the
Yeah.
brink before you get warned, and then you kind of dial it back.
Yeah, it was one of those things where like, yeah, you know this. You ask coaches sometimes what they think, and that was basically the answer from every single coach. So it was definitely something they felt, and I think it's a good rule change.
One of the other things I just wanted to cover with you here on the Hockey East topic is how, since my arrival here at UMass back in 2018, seeing this TV package evolve, and now you're
Hmm.
part of it more so than you have been in the past as the Hockey East broadcast of the week, which is focused on Fridays or Saturdays on Nesson. And I think they've left some flex dates in there too for the
Hmm.
schedule down the line to see what games are going to, matter most in crunch time. But from a TV package perspective, I think I love what the league has done, and they've continued to grow this. And you and Bridget Prue, Cooper Boardman will be on some of these calls as well,
Hmm.
our radio voice, and Kevin Gale. So, what is your, I guess, perspective of how this relationship has grown and what it means for the league?
Yeah, big week for Staples High School, huh? Cooper's getting
Is that
Hockey East games. Ben Consperius starting the World Series. There you go, right? Um, yeah, it's a
is
really
that
good
some
thing.
fancy Connecticut high school? I'm guessing.
That's I've
Oh,
known
okay.
Cooper since yeah, Cooper and I went to the same high school. So yeah, that was that.
Elite Broadcasting High School.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I think, the unique part of this league is, UMass is one of the farther teams out and they're 2 hours away from everyone. Like everyone's so close together within the city limits, and even some of the teams that are on the outskirts, you're talking 2, 3 hours. It's not these massive conferences that in other sports are becoming, geographic, anomalies that don't make a ton of sense. So it's such an important thing in the city and expanding out from there. It really matters to people. And so, it's really cool to have these flex dates at the end of the year so we can
Yeah.
try to pinpoint what the best dates are going to be. But the exciting thing is there aren't really that many bad games you could pick for these. Like, so I think most of the ones you have during the slate, because again, everyone's pretty good. Everyone's got a lot of local guys and people want to watch it. So it's a lot of fun. I'm really glad we have the partnership with this show that, of course, UMass fans know Tyler Murray, who started it with me last year, and then Bridget's coming in this year, and we have the platform on Nesson. So, to get basically a 6:30 to 9:30 block of Hockey East, that's an amazing thing. We have a bunch of games Saturday as well. So I think it's just expanding out. It feels like there is, fans who maybe weren't necessarily hockey fans, but are fans of a lot of these schools. You guys know this at UMass, right? How many people did Greg Carville bring in, over the last, what, 5, 6, 7 years, that maybe weren't necessarily hockey fans before, but now are?
Oh, yeah.
the crowds have been, you guys were announced to sell out on Friday, right?
Yep.
I can't even tell you how good the crowds have been at Boston College the last couple of years, and it's not like they haven't been good in the past. You look at Maine, you look at Northeastern, I think was sold out on Friday. There's really a buzz, and I don't know if it's after COVID that people are just interested in going to games again and interested in sports again. But it really feels like there's a yearning for it to go along with the other sports in this town. So it's a really great partnership, and I'm excited to be part of it.
Eric, we're excited to watch you each weekend when you get a chance, and hopefully we'll see you on a UMass game in the near future. We'll check in with you in the second half of the season, buddy. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me, Jay. Appreciate it.